Tennessee beats Vanderbilt 28-10. Talking about it on a little Instant React podcast with Jesse Simonton and Austin Price. I'm Brent Hubbs. Tennessee moves to 7-5 on the season, bettering their bowl hopes. One would think, although it'll be interesting to see what the rest of the league does and how all that shakes out. We'll jump to that in a minute. But guys, the story of this 28-10 sloppy, wet, ugly game is the fact that a freshman, Eric Gray, who's really been non-existent for the better part of this win streak Tennessee's been on, leads Tennessee to a record-setting performance, passing Jamal Lewis for the freshman mark for a single-season game in rushing. I don't think anybody saw Eric Gray coming tonight. What do you make of the freshman's performance?
I mean, he hit the hole. He hit the hole and took it to the house twice with just gaping holes. But he showed his cutback ability. Matthew Butler said it after the game. He probably is the best, cutback, one-cut runner on this team. But no, I mean, no one saw that coming. He had 40 yards on 20-some-odd carries since the Georgia game. So for him to explode and get 250 tonight on a night when Ty Chandler isn't really available, on a night when Tennessee, frankly, did not play particularly well, offensively. Otherwise, Garantano threw for 120, and 20 of those came on a schoolyard Brett Favre pitch to Dominic Wood Anderson, and 50 of them came on a quick slant to Jawan Jennings. He did most of the work. So, but again, we had it. We said it in the 2-minute. The fact that Tennessee, where this program is, where this team is, can play fairly uninspiring and win a game by 18 against an in-state rival that they've lost to by double digits the last 3 years, I think that shows legitimately how far this program has come. Not only, since Pruitt got here, but specifically within this season.
Austin, it's a funny game. Football's a funny game. 1 week you're throwing for 400-plus yards, setting records. You got 3 receivers with 100 yards. Josh Palmer doesn't have a catch tonight. And yet this team finds another way, as Jesse was talking about. What shows you more growth in this team? The fact that they can win an ugly game where they don't play well, or the fact that they can win in multiple capacities, whether it's throwing it or whether it's running it.
There you go. And it's not just winning it, whether it's throwing it or running it. It's winning a high-scoring game. It's winning a low-scoring game. It's, they scored 41 when they beat South Carolina. They, scored in the teens, against Kentucky. I mean, they've just found a way. This team's, I think just the growth defensively is probably the biggest thing that I take away from the last 7 games. It looked like, just, I won't say Sal Sinceri because that's not correct, but I mean, it looked very familiar to what we saw the last few years under Bob Shoop the first few weeks of the year. They couldn't tackle big plays, taking bad angles, and then it's like all of a sudden, Jeremy says, we didn't take a peel, but I mean, like, it almost feels like they did. I mean, like, they've been so much better up front on both lines of scrimmage, but specifically the defensive line, and I think Daniel Batuli, having him healthy every game, through after week 2, it was huge for them. And then Henry's continued to grow, and Nigel has played the way he's played. And honestly, it's not just those guys. I mean, guys like Alontae Taylor, have really gotten better the last few weeks. I mean, Alontae's a guy that, was kind of, setting the bench there for a good portion of the season, and then has found a little bit of a footing in the last few weeks. I mean, Kenneth George has given them quality snaps. I mean, it's just been a total team effort defensively and just on the whole team in general.
Yeah, I mean, Alontae was good tonight. I don't know. He hadn't sat the bench as much as I think it may have seemed. He's been in the doghouse with the staff, but he's still played more snaps at cornerback than anybody on this roster.
But he did play. He's playing faster.
He is, and he's playing physical. And it was unfortunate that he did not get credit for just, you talk about a physical, impressive play. That forced fumble when he's getting his face mask ripped off and he punches it out, and Tennessee isn't the beneficiary because Matthew Butler also got his face mask. I mean, but that good quiet game from Alontae.
Yeah, also brings up the point about the defense. I mean, there's so much talk about Jared and Jawan, and rightfully so. Look, those guys have been the story. I mean, Jawan's play, the consistency he's had all year long, the roller coaster of the season that Jared's had. We've talked about Trey Smith and some of the bigger stories. Has the defense's improvement on this team been a bit overlooked by fans? Because it feels like they've just kind of quietly gotten better each and every week. Have they been great? Have they been perfect? No, but they've limited big plays. Maybe they haven't forced as many turnovers, but they've really been steady against the run during this stretch, going back to that Mississippi State game, and they've become a very consistent defense.
Yeah, I mean, they're feisty.
Yeah,
and
they really are.
And I wouldn't even, perhaps fans have overlooked them, but I would say, we at VolQuest have not. I mean, you were the one that said on this very podcast, just this past week, if someone had told you that Tennessee was going to allow fewer rushing yards than a year ago, despite losing those three guys that are now in the NFL, saw Shy Tuttle rumbling down the field on Thanksgiving. I mean, it speaks to the growth of the defensive line. We've written a lot about Nigel Warrior and just kind of his renaissance and ascension, kind of out of nowhere in the second half of the season. Obviously, Tennessee has gotten major contributions from a freshman like Danny Batuli. And then just the steadiness of Henry To'oTo'o, and then just the steadiness of Danny Batuli.
So how does this defense go from a defense who didn't look like they could line up? I mean, we all remember the Georgia State game. They got two guys on the wrong side of the ball, it looks like. They go to Florida, the middle of the field's completely wide open. Nobody's defending anybody between the hash marks. How does this defense go from that to being the steady hand for Tennessee to get them to a bowl game? It took all parts. I don't want to say it's all on the defense, but they've been the more consistent unit the last 6-7 weeks. How does it happen?
Well, this may be dumbing it down, but it's almost like in baseball. You're going to have a good defense if it's just straight up the middle. Your catcher, your shortstop, and your center fielder are all pretty damn good. And the fact that they got Batuli back, their interior guys from Aubrey Solomon to a guy like Karat Garland, who had a couple big plays tonight, just got better as the season went along. And then Nigel, again, playing center field, him taking, when they've been able to shore that up, that's allowed Pruitt to dial up all these corner blitzes, all these cat blitzes. Each week somebody else on defense has kind of emerged to make a play. Tonight, two freshmen recorded their first sack. We haven't seen Roman Harrison in weeks, and suddenly he's, bending on an inside rush off the edge, getting a sack. Kravars Crouch got a sack. So I think it's the interior, just defensive line, not necessarily an individual, but those guys, Batuli, Warrior, and then kind of the surrounding parts, I think, has made this unit a formidable group.
Austin, was the absence of Daniel Batuli early in the year maybe the significance of that not realized until the back half of the season when this team started playing well? Did some people kind of overlook how big of a loss Batuli was at the start of the year? I think I did for this defense personally.
Well, I do. I mean, I just think that the growth, man. I mean, the growth with every player. This is not knocking the previous staff, okay? But I've not seen this kind of development or lights come on for kids in a while. I mean, and I'm not talking about just one or two guys. It's multiple guys where, they were, I won't say left for dead, but they just kind of were, people thought, okay, same old Nigel Warrior, same old Daniel Batuli, same old this, same old that. And these guys have just gotten better and better and can, continue to work. And, I mean, how can you not be impressed by this staff's development of guys? I mean, what they've got out of these kids. I mean, Jeremy talks about the buy-in, but he's right. I mean, there has been again, I won't say that the guys that left were cancers. I don't think that's accurate. But I do think when you had those handful of guys leave and everybody looked around the room and said, anybody else? And no one else got up. I think that, at that point, everybody just kind of gelled together. And, they've found a way to win these 50-50 games that Tennessee's not won, in the last 5 or 6 years. And they swept them. Yeah. I mean, who saw them sweeping them? I mean, anybody that in their right mind thought, they can still get back to a bowl after 1-4. They thought they were going to have to beat this team tonight to get 6, not win tonight to get 7. I mean, they swept every one of those games and, played right with Alabama there and played them tough. An Alabama team that scored 5 points tonight against Auburn, a great Auburn defense. So I mean, Tennessee's program. Jeremy says they're coming and they're coming fast. I don't know. I don't know if that's accurate based off the fact you're going to lose some really key players on this team. But I do think that you can look at this program and see the tangible growth to think they're going to continue to go that direction. They're going to continue on their upward arc, if they continue to get development the way they've got it.
Couldn't climb the ladder without stepping over the Vandy's and South Carolina's and Missouri's first. And Tennessee did that this season.
Yeah,
where they go in 2020 is going to be its own story. Progress is not linear. It's going to be a challenge replacing, as we were saying, just how important Danny Batula and Nigel Warrior and these guys are. That's not to say Tennessee can't win 8 or 9 games, but I think it probably is too early for them, at least next season, to compete for an SEC East title. But I think Pruitt, he had the comment tonight, if you were here day one, you don't understand how far we've come. He's right, but I think it is more nuanced than that. When you take it away, it's not that the cupboard was bare, because it wasn't. They don't have a lot of depth, but they clearly have some pretty darn talented players. And a guy like Trey Smith is going to go play in the NFL, and Darrell Taylor and Tennessee's going to have their best showing, at that draft in years this season. But it was getting the buy-in, and it was truly, I think, getting a team full of guys, young and old, who didn't really know how to win, and teaching them how to win. Where again, on a night like tonight, they don't play that well, and they almost won by 3 touchdowns.
Well, and they go 5-3 in league play, and it's they as Jesse said, to beat Florida and all those teams, you've got to learn to beat the teams you've not been able to beat, and here's the key, I think, in all this. And Tennessee took advantage of it this year, even though they started 0-2 against Georgia State and BYU. They took advantage of the fact that they had Mississippi State on the schedule. Next year they get Arkansas. The following year they have Ole Miss. The year after that, they start back in that run of A&M, LSU, and Auburn to go along with Alabama. So you've really got to take advantage of these next 2 years. Next year, though, you do have Oklahoma on the road to start the year, or at the second game of the year. Tennessee needs to take advantage of the schedule, especially in league play, not having one of these other juggernaut teams like LSU and Auburn. I know Tennessee beat Auburn last year, but it's a different team.
Look, you'd rather have Mississippi State on your schedule.
No doubt. So you've got to take advantage of this 3-year run.
Well, and it's what Jesse said, and maybe maybe the best thing or the most accurate thing on the podcast. To walk, you got to crawl, and for Tennessee, crawling was stopping a 3-game slide to Vanderbilt. It was winning a game against Kentucky, and I know they beat them the year before, but going up there and finding a way. It's beating the South Carolinas who you haven't been able to beat and haven't been able to find a way. It's finding a way to win maybe an ugly game, a shootout, as Austin mentioned. It's on that particular day finding a way to win. That's the thing this program really hasn't been able to do. They've had their moments, okay? In 16, they found a way to beat Florida. They found the Hail Mary to beat Georgia. But they couldn't win the shootout at Texas A&M where they lost in overtime. They couldn't win an ugly game on the road at South Carolina. And that was the best team that Tennessee's had
and you go back to that.
5 years.
That's A&M and Bama back-to-back weeks. So two of those 4 really good teams in the West. And then when you lose those 2, it leaves you with no wiggle room. So, when you don't have that wiggle room, it just changes things in league play. So it's hard to get to Atlanta if you don't have a little wiggle room. And Tennessee did not have wiggle room in 16 because of the tougher schedule. And then they did, I understand, they crapped their pants against South Carolina and Vanderbilt. But my point, though, is if you're playing one of those other lesser teams in the West, then you can afford one of those games. Not both, but one of those games.
But I don't care what your schedule in the West is. When you beat Florida and Georgia in the same year, your ass better be in Atlanta. Pardon my French.
Yeah.
You should be.
Well, and all of that is irrelevant in the now,
right?
In the sense that this team had to beat the other teams it hadn't been beating, regardless of who was on their schedule in the SEC West, from their own division.
Right.
And that is what they've been able to do this season, and that is something that certainly Pruitt and this staff hope to build upon.
Well, and it's something they certainly deserve credit for being able to do with this team this year. All right, as we wrap it up, bowl stuff. We talked about it a little bit on the podcast on Friday. Might have helped Tennessee more had Alabama beaten Auburn. They did not. Alabama's going to be in the group of 6. They're not going to fall out. Somebody's asking on GQ. They're going to fall out of the group of 6.
No, they're still going to be a New Year's 6 team.
They're going to be a New Year's 6 team. Florida
beating the tar out of FSU, but now their best win Well, their best win is a win over Auburn, which does look good, but are they going to get squeezed out? I said this, we were talking in the press box. Tennessee's best path to definitely playing in a bowl like the Outback Bowl is probably getting 2 SEC teams in the playoff, which is going to require an upset in the SEC championship game. If that doesn't happen, then Florida may get squeezed out of the New Year's Six, because then it's going to be Alabama and Georgia in the New Year's Six. Still an outside shot for the Gators, but I think they could get squeezed out in that scenario, which would mean the Outback and Citrus would probably get their pick of Florida and Auburn. So does Tennessee? Is Tennessee going to get Tennessee? Hopefully, then, for our sake and even Tennessee fans' sake, would not fall further than Jacksonville. That would be kind of my breakdown. But I mean, Nashville folks were here today.
I talked to some people today, and the biggest thing I heard is the number one thing that the league office listens to, and after the Citrus Bowl, they're all the same. Nashville, Charlotte, Outback, Jacksonville, they're all the same. But the biggest thing they listen to the bowls. They listen to, because at the end of the day, they want their bowls happy. And, the fact that Kentucky was there 2 years ago, A&M was there last year, if what you said would happen and it was going to be Auburn and Florida battling out for the Outback and the Citrus, then I do think that the Taxslayer Bowl really covets Tennessee based off of the fact that it's a day after New Year's. It's harder to get fans to that one because of the travel and all that, and so they want a team that's going to show up. And so
that'll be a big and
again, honestly, they had those two teams. The two teams they'd be competing with are Texas A&M,
but if you say Kentucky was 2 years ago, I mean it's in every other year. I mean, like Tennessee and these teams played in the Citrus every other year for you. I mean, like it's A&M's out of the conversation. They're not the way they finished the season. I mean, I don't see them. I mean, they just laid down this week. If in that scenario, it would be between Tennessee and Kentucky.
And it's hard to see that. It's hard to imagine it not being Tennessee, because the Tennessee fan base would appear more excited. Although Kentucky did finish and to beat Louisville handily, and and Bowden's a good story and all those things. But you would think the Tennessee fan base would covet that trip more than the Kentucky fan base would covet it. But we'll see. I'm with you guys. I think it's hard to imagine 4 teams being in the playoff in the New Year's Six from the SEC based on where everything's at right now. Not saying it won't happen, but that seems a little bit unrealistic. It would seem more like one playoff team and then 2 New Year's Six teams, unless Georgia pulls off the upset and LSU doesn't fall out of the top 4. And I don't know that that's a given either. So
I think no matter what, LSU goes into next weekend knowing they got a spot.
Win or lose,
that they will fall no lower than 4, and that if Georgia wins, it would be 2-3 Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, LSU. Utah would be the team that would get squeezed in that scenario, and in that scenario, Florida would make a New Year's Six game, which would then
open up the potential for the
Outback Bowl for the Vols.
For Tennessee. So we'll see. That's all how it shakes out next week. For now, what we know is Tennessee's bowling, and Tennessee's done the best they can to help their stock by sweeping the month of November. They end a 3-game slide with a win over Vanderbilt tonight, 28-10. That's going to do it for this Instant React podcast. For Jesse Simonton, Austin Price, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your weekend, everybody.